was the state of the legal aid system before the cuts?
Probably not surprising to anybody in the room here, Legal Aid Ontario, like many of the other public service agencies here, was woefully underfunded and under-resourced already. Lawyers in the courtroom that, like myself, were scrambling to provide services to individuals that would come in the doors and need representation, need advice, need services to be able to navigate a complex legal system.
We are not able to provide any service in areas of law that are really badly needed by Indigenous people, like family or criminal. So I would say that as long as I've been there and before, we've been chronically underfunded.
For specialty clinic like ours, where we do systemic change, we do preventative work before people actually get to the courts. We have always been underfunded.
One of our specific struggles is that we're servicing a largely rural population. So we have very few and limited points of contact when we're trying to do our work. And when we're talking about access to justice and equity, that poses a huge problem and challenge for us.
So I want to have a bit of a discussion about what the impact of those cuts have been on the services that you provide.
A big chunk of the work that legal clinics do is save people's housing so that people are not evicted, or they help tenants actually get the landlords to do the maintenance and repair that they often don't do. And for us specifically, it's the systemic work that is impacted. So for instance, ACTO for 10 years took the provincial government to court for their failure to provide adequate and safe housing to Ontarians, and we were fighting for the right to housing. And we did a lot of organizing on the ground, and the federal government just this year recognized that housing is a legal right. That kind of work with the cuts, it's going to be impossible.
There's been a drastic cut to the services that are being provided in the family courts. And I think that that's been really devastating to individuals in the family courts and to the lawyers that are practicing there. So coming into those courts now, people that used to be able to get somebody to speak on their behalf when they're at risk of losing custody of their child, when they're at risk of losing access to their child. These can be women fleeing domestic violence. And again, they're already at this very low financial threshold. So we're not talking about people that are in a good financial state that can go out and get a lawyer. These are people that don't have any other options, and they're now being told, well, maybe I can give you a few minutes of kind of advice, but then you've got to go in there and stand up against another lawyer, because oftentimes the other party is represented, and in front of a judge and advocate for your rights. I think the other thing that's missing from this conversation is the impact from a financial standpoint, that this isn't saving anybody any money, which is what obviously we all know, but what's being put out there as the messaging. So unrepresented trials, unrepresented individuals take up much longer in the court system. This means increased costs all around.
What's become really difficult is the areas of law that we already don't have capacity to practice in, because we're very spread thin. We have always relied very heavily on the clinic, like on ACTO, the work that Bahar does, as well as ISAC, which is the Income Security Advocacy Center. And so the fact that their capacity has been cut the way it has means that there's less ability for us to draw on them. They've been a really huge resource to us.
I'm going to ask each of our panelists to maybe tell us briefly about what would be on the top of their wish list if they could ask for one thing to help the clients or the communities they serve.
I mean, for me, the obvious would be to restore our funding and to not take any more away from us. But I think focusing on the interconnectedness of the clinic system, as Bahar said, like, we work together as a system. There's over 70 of us. There's not one community in this province that is not served by a community legal clinic.
My wish is pretty simple. I would love for the labor movement to be more engaged and involved with clinic system as a whole, especially when it comes to right to housing. It is a very basic fundamental right, and it impacts every person.
Decolonization, please. I'd like to see actual Indigenous legal services and not have us lumped into some kind of a specialty model that doesn't meet our needs.
I'd like to see everyone in this room petition their MPP to restore and improve the funding for Legal Aid Ontario. Thank you. And to have your friends and families do the same. And I think that that's what's needed to make any change from the Ford government on this issue. We've seen them go back on other issues. We really need to see that happen for this.